Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us. On the program today, we may well have the hardest working guy on the planet. Well, I don't know about that, but he is certainly working on behalf of our planet. Since he was a teenager, he has worked for the conservation of endangered species and ecosystems around the world. He is best known to audiences as the host of the Jeff Corwin Experience that you can see on the cable channel The Animal Planet. Jeff, thanks for being here. Thank you. I was joking beforehand. Yeah. You have so many titles. You've done so many things. Conservationist, naturalist, anthropologist, father, husband. So what do you like to be called? When someone references you, what do you like for them to refer to you as?
I think professionally, I consider myself a wildlife biologist and a television producer and host. But I think the role that I take stock of the most, I'm most proud of, is a role that I didn't think would be that amazing to me, but as being a father, I mean, it's like one of those things, you don't know it till you got it, and then you got it, you don't know how you live without it.
Exactly, and it's, just wait. It gets even better, let me just tell you.
That's what I've heard.
Yes, so, okay, we'll go with that title, but the teenage thing, that you started working as a teenager on behalf of the environment?
Well, I've always been very curious about the natural world, and upon making discoveries, you realize that and this is nothing new to our planet, but the natural world is in peril, and we're losing habitat, we're losing species, and especially now at a very accelerated rate. So since a child, I was always very much into conservation and trying to build awareness, especially about animals that people had an infamiliarity of or didn't like, and that very much was the fuel that pushed me into the woods and to have the adventures that I had. And from about the age of 16 to about the age of 28, I off and on spent most of that time in rainforests in Central and South America.
But now that's teenagers, so were you the kid on the block who, while everybody else was playing kick the can or hide and seek, you were there exploring nature, looking at, so was it even back then?
I lived in the woods since about the age of 6 years old. That element, the mystery, the opportunity for discovery and adventure, and that lived in that realm and the wild world always drew me in, whether it was a swamp, whether it was a bog, whether it was a forest, a meadow. If there was something there to be discovered, an adventure to be had, I spent most of my childhood there. I often tell people that, you know, I've never played a video game, so even to this day I've never played a video game, and never have, and I'm not good at any of those sorts of competitive sports.
But that's okay, because you're good at other things. Indeed you are. Okay, so you're a teenager, you decide you're going to devote your life to this, so you said from 16 to 28, here you spent your life in rainforests. And then you realized, hello, maybe through the medium of television I can get out this message to a larger audience. How did all that transpire?
Well, I was in that period of my life where I was going from my undergraduate work to my graduate studies, and I was sort of hanging out in the rainforests of Central America trying to formulate what I wanted to study, and I knew it was going to be something to do with bats or perhaps something with reptiles and amphibians, and while I was down there sort of developing my future research and also running a field station while I was down there for people who were doing research at the time and people who were getting educated about rainforests, I was featured in a documentary, and that was just the light bulb going off. It very much was a catalyst within me that focused what I wanted, and I realized I could use television as a medium to get people excited about the natural world, hopefully to provide them in my way, in my style, with information that they could potentially and ultimately apply to conservation.
And so you have. I mean, you are seen by some 30 million people. You are seeing your show in 70 countries. So you're out there, you're getting the message across. And that has to be, to me, an incredible responsibility to know that you are out there and people are looking to you to get the message about what's happening to the planet.
It is, and I think people who work in the media, whether it's television or radio, especially when they're dealing with important stuff, information that can ultimately impact the health of us as a species and in the world around us, I think you can get heady with that information. And in the past, I used to actually stress out about it, but what I've realized is that I can only do the best I can. I work really hard. I'm often in the field 10 months out of the year. When I come home, I do my very best to
be home.
To be home, compartmentalize that part of my life, and then focus on the other part of my life, which is as, if not more important, which is my family.
So you decided you needed to focus, okay? Planet has problems, need to get people to pay attention. If I were to say to you, what is the largest problem facing our planet as we speak? Because, I mean, we could go on for the next 5 hours and talk about the many problems, the myriad. But what's the biggest problem that we need to look at right now and do something about, in your opinion?
We've reached an incredible moment, a milestone with regard to the history of life on our planet, and it's not necessarily a happy place where we're at. For the first time since life has existed on Earth, almost all other life forms, their survivability, their opportunity to exist in the future, is now dependent upon and impacted by one species, which is the human species. And through our behavior, through how we've treated our planet, how we've used our natural resources, how we've exited our waste as a species, we have created a situation where the level of extinction today is only equaled by when dinosaurs were wiped out by a great cosmic catastrophic event some 60 million years ago. And what I find tragically remarkable about this, it's not from the cockroaches or the rats, it's from an incredibly sentient, intelligent, self-aware species who understand, we as a species understand we have an impact. But up till recently, I think as a whole, globally, we've failed to exercise our responsibility and stewardship. And where we are now is we have huge, huge problems with our planet.
Well, but I mean, is that out of ignorance? Were we just, you know, doing what we thought was the best thing to do and suddenly realized, shouldn't have been doing it that way?
Well, I don't think it is out of ignorance, because we've always understood the concept of accountability. Conservation laws aren't new to our country. We've had national parks for almost 100 years. We can look to Linnaeus and scientists from a century ago or more who looked at how we use natural resources, you know, from Audubon to Aldo Leopold. So thinking about how we interact and use our natural resources is not new, and understanding that we do have an impact. So I just don't think we've lived up to our potential, and what has happened is I like to think that we've created this perfect storm. It's a combination of habitat loss, it's a combination of climate change, it is a combination of a degradation of habitat, of a fast and unregulated growth in our species, our population, and the unsustainable exploitation of wildlife and species that has come together to create this great wave, which is wiping out life across the planet.
You know, and you hear those words, but you're living it. You're out there, you're in the trenches, so to speak. You see it, it's real. It's not someone out there just saying, oh yeah, you know, this could happen. So what you're here telling is it's real, it's happening.
Well, you can get, the devil's always in the details, and there's lots of nuances to these situations. Just 4 or 5 years ago, the concept of climate change, of global warming, was somewhat speculative. But now we're looking at the data and we see that the climate is changing. Now we're in another argument. Is it climate changing because the Earth is changing as it naturally would? Are we a part of this change as we contribute, for example, greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which keeps the heat in from radiating into the solar system? All these things, we can sort of question these little pieces of the equation of our challenge to conserve. But the reality is extinction does exist. It has always existed, and there are many things that have come and gone long before human beings ever lived on this planet. But we can look to our environment and we can see where we've changed that environment, where we've unsustainably used a species, where we've driven it to extinction. And it's not just the dodo bird or the Stella sea cow. I mean, there are creatures that I've filmed in my life that the people who have watched my show and have seen that don't exist anymore.
They no longer exist.
No, I've filmed birds in Hawaii that no longer exist. I've filmed frogs in Central America that no longer exist.
No, I saw a statistic, every 20 minutes a species becomes extinct?
Amongst many within the scientific community, and some of the respected and established conservation groups such as the IUCN, look at statistics like the extinction rate is about 1,000 times more intense and faster than it should be than the natural rate. And one of the statistics and I always have to be careful about statistics. Sure. But yes, it's every year about 20,000 life forms will disappear.
Take us through the story. I saw it in a published report about you in Hawaii, where you talk about some of the birds that you filmed in Hawaii that no longer exist. But this is a very poignant story of when you really got the aha moment, the little green bird.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, they apply what I call charismatic species syndrome. It's almost an artificial or a human value of what we as a species at that moment in our culture apply to an animal. But in the real world, in the natural world, in the biological sense, life doesn't attribute a value. Life doesn't say that a colony of termites is any more biologically valued than a beautiful jaguar, this apex predator. We have species that are keystone species, for example, where many life forms are interconnected and dependent upon it. For example, a fig tree. So many life forms exist around that fig and depend on that fig for survival. But for me, I've always had an issue with this because I've always been fascinated by sort of the creepy, crawly critters, the snakes and the spiders and stuff. So it always bothered me when people didn't care if an animal became extinct because they didn't like it. And we were filming in Hawaii, and I remember we went all the ways to Hawaii, all the ways to this bird center off of Maui, and we were filming this bird. And I remember just all excited to see it, and it was all this hoop-de-doo about this exciting bird. I remember them sliding over this little door in this aviary that was surrounded by electric fence. And when we looked in, there was this little bird, and I said to the curator, I'm like, well, what's the big deal about this? And he said, it's the last one. And it was, and now there's no more. It became extinct.
Oh, that's an aha moment. And we're going to find out more about those aha moments and those creepy crawlies that Jeff has a tendency to get in the swamps with, or water, or rainforest, or whatever it may be, when we come back right after this, so don't go away. Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb, and we are rejoined by Jeff Corwin, who is the host of the very popular Animal Planet, seen on cable television, Jeff Corwin Experience. And that's just one of the many shows you do. In looking up some of your information, you were in Alaska, you were also filming something for the Food Network. You just do all kinds of stuff. How do you
Well, Alaska was that was a series that I finished up that just finished airing, and where I spent about a year traveling throughout the state of Alaska, basically celebrating this incredible part of our landscape. It's the last great frontier in North America. So we just did everything you could do in Alaska, from fly fishing to mushing a dog team through the Arctic, so reliving the run through Nome, all these great adventures. And then now I'm actually filming the second season to that, which is called Into the West, and it's from the Canadian Rockies to Mexico. And a lot of what I'm focused on right now is because I think we tend to drift and focus on places outside of our backyards, and we forget to celebrate celebrate the incredible natural history and heritage of North America. So I wanted to do a series that just celebrated what is unique to our people who live here in this great land.
Well, maybe we can get you back to take a look at our karst system, you know, the Mammoth Cave and the house.
I have done shows in the karst.
You've done shows in the cave?
Yes, I've done on the cave salamanders and all the unique cave lives, cave crayfish.
Shrimp, those kind of,
yep,
yeah.
I've done it.
So, do you ever, I just have to know this, because you're not even 40 yet. You have done...
No, I just turned 40.
Oh, you did?
I
Congratulations.
did. Yeah.
But you have done so many incredible things. You have been all around this great world. Is there a place on this planet that you say that is the most special place on this planet?
There are lots of places. I've come to really appreciate the beauty and the majestic splendor of North America, and specifically the United States. I think that's been the gift I've gotten out of this series, the Into the America series, to wander the Sonoran Desert and know you can wander for hundreds of miles through saguaro cactus and pinnacles of ancient sandstone, or through the Navajo Desert, or to go through the sweeping prairie of Custer Park in South Dakota. You know, you think the Dakotas, you think of the movie Fargo, but when you go to South Dakota, and you go with the rangers of Custer State Park, and I was invited by the rangers, a very rare opportunity and privilege to go out with them and ride and move 500 bison to their feeding grounds. And you go up over a mountain, you see elk, and you're moving with these animals that once numbered a century and a half ago at 50 million, were reduced to 800 animals. But because of waking up, we were able to bring that population up to 500,000 animals today. So people don't realize this. That's why I don't give up hope that we can't, because there are many examples in our country. For example, in this series, Into the West, going out with the U.S. National Park Service and releasing black-footed ferret, an animal that was thought to have been extinct, that has gone from 11 animals to 2,000 have been produced from 11 animals. To be a part of those stories and show them that's my heritage, that's your heritage, and we forget that. And for me, my favorite places are places like Alaska. I love the Everglades of Florida. I love the Sonoran Desert, the redwood forests of California. Big Sur. Just last week, I was releasing with the Ventana Foundation and Wildlife Society, releasing condors back into the wild. I mean, those moments for me make me proud to be an American.
And the spokesperson, because there are so many people who will never have that opportunity, will merely see those condors in a book, will never experience that. So again, you have that responsibility.
Well, hopefully they won't see those condors in a book. Hopefully they will see them in person if their families ever drive down from the LA to San Francisco Drive. There are now I think about 140 wild condors, 300 in existence. That doesn't seem like much, and it's a species that is not out of the woods yet. But this is a species recovered from 22 individuals. Wow. So this is a species we almost lost. We sobered up. The reality crystallized within us of what the loss would be, and we were able to salvage that species. And you can see them in the wild today.
Planet in Peril is a documentary that you worked on with CNN's Sanjay Gupta and Anderson Cooper, and you were the environmental specialist on that, if you will. And something that stands out was the incident that you had with an elephant in Cambodia, but that's just one of many incidents. You're out there with wild animals. What is it that you would say to people? I mean, you put yourself in really dangerous situations, very risky situations with wild animals, because you can never predict what they're going to do or how they're going to react. What is it? What is the key there to handling a situation like that?
Well, I think the key to it is to actually minimize risk, and for me, I actually try not to put myself in risk situations. I try to really, number one is I don't want to have anything happen to the animals that we're highlighting. I don't want anything to happen to me, and especially with issues of integrity, both for the species of wildlife and for myself as an explorer, as a presenter on television. That's not my style of television. It's not where I want to go. Not to say that levity and humor isn't a part of what I do, because I feel that's a great way to tell a story, is to pull people's blinds down and let them relax and have a good time in telling a story. But fundamentally, I rely on my formal education and my life experience. And if it's a situation of true risk, then it's something I won't engage in. The elephant section example of how we were careful, in that had we just gone up to wild elephants and that had happened, I probably would not have survived that. But we were telling the story of these elephants in this wildlife rehabilitation center. We were doing what they do with these elephants 7 days a week, twice a week, bathe them, play with them, give them that tactility to get, and then one of the elephants just lashed out, and had there not been people there, it probably would have been very serious. It reminds you that there's always risks in everything you do. A lot of people look at what I do and it seems very foreign to them, but it's not their life. For me, the only way I could equal that or understand it would be like if I got into a helicopter. If you sat down with me in a helicopter and you said, fly this helicopter, I would kill us against a mountain. But if you asked a pilot to fly a helicopter, he could fly that helicopter because he's trained, he's understand it, that's his world. I don't get that world. I don't expect people to get my world as a field biologist. I can't play a violin. You know, I'm not a, I can't play golf. It's what I do. This is my expertise. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it's not a perfect environment. But that's my job and that's what I do.
And in this instance, the elephant was merely being playful, which is what they do.
Well, he was on the edge, and elephants can be incredibly dangerous, and they're very, very powerful animals, especially when you give them their weight and their size and their strength. This is an animal with its trunk. It can pick up a 700-pound limb, but yet the tip of it is 10 times more sensitive than a fingertip. But despite all its brawn and its strength and its power, it's a species that will probably disappear from the wilds of Cambodia within the next 3 or 4 decades. The population is reduced to just a few hundreds from thousands. What I was worried about was that moment, which makes what we would call great television. For me, it's my least favorite moment in that series. But it's kind of hard to not have that be in the series because that's part of the story, the telling story process. It also does highlight the risks that we went through to try to get there. But those were the least risky things with the stuff we did with wildlife. And a lot of time when we work with wildlife, I'm often working with a scientist, for example, in that facility. I'm often basically the sidekick of a scientist who is doing incredible research, like with the polar bears, and using that moment, using the efforts for discovery and conservation from a professional who specializes in that to help tell our story. But the risk for me was sneaking into the markets of Myanmar and Burma to show the black market trade in tiger skins, or being in we're filming in Alaska. We had 3 emergency landings with aircraft, one with my daughter in my lap. I mean, that to me is a far more, being in a coup d'etat in Phnom Penh, when you see a Molotov cocktail being thrown in your direction, is far more terrifying than an elephant ever could be.
So when people say, oh, you're very courageous, do you say, no, I just do what I do?
If people know, anyone who knows me knows that I'm actually not a risk taker. If I'm going to gamble, I'm going to cheat at the hand first before I throw down any money. And with my life, I always assess what everything is. And the last thing, especially being a father, when I was younger, as all of us when we were younger, we're probably more cavalier with our lives. But if you look at a lot of the production and shows that I've done within probably the last 6 or 7 years, you'll see that that element of jeopardy and risk is less, and I think it's more on the journey and more on telling a story of conservation and wildlife. Yeah.
You're basically kind of like what I do. You're telling a story. We're telling your story today. And your arm is okay, yes?
My arm, it actually took my arm about, I didn't make a big deal about it, but it took my arm about 6 or 7 months to really recover at what was called the compression injury, where it actually didn't tear things, but it crushed and sort of squished it all up. And
if you've seen the footage, I mean, it just happens
and you're just a rag doll going back and forth. And I just sort of, I didn't want to focus on it. So like right after that, I went sort of laughed it off and sort of made a self-deprecating joke, and then went right into relocating these pythons that were going to be poached but I actually was an incredible plan. I don't think I had could sleep a whole night for about a month. Yeah.
God bless you. Steve Irwin, you knew him?
I didn't know him personally.
You didn't?
Never met him, no.
Now, see, people would just make that assumption.
Yeah, they would assume they did.
Yeah, y'all worked together, right? No, but you didn't.
No, we didn't. I think we had very, very different styles and very different approaches, and we also were very committed and focused on what we did. That there was, you know, no reason to be working together. We weren't in competition with each other, but we had very different audiences for which we were targeted and worked with. I admired who he was and what he did and have great respect for him. I think what was incredibly tragic was, as I understand it, he was an incredible husband and father, and I think that's the real loss of his untimely death. But it's one of those things, like, I'm in the field conservatively 10 months out of the year. When we're working, we work 12 to sometimes 18 hours a day to tell a story. When I come back, I refocus and
go from there.
And go
if
from
we
there.
have only 30 seconds, we could talk for hours. What do you have yet to do? What's out there?
I don't. What I'm trying to do now is I look forward to taking a less is more approach with my life someday, and really focusing on things that I could do with my family. One of the great joys of being in South Dakota and Custer State Park and Wind Cave was not just the adventure, not just the being on a horse and moving bison with park rangers, but having my daughter there and seeing her explore as a young person. And for me, that's the greatest joy. Seeing my daughter out there having an adventure and making discoveries, whether it's the animal world and the non-animal, is far more rewarding than anything I can peel away at the stuff I'm doing.
Well, continued success.
Thank you.
We've been talking with Jeff Corwin. Be sure to tune in to his program on the Animal Planet cable channel. That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us.